And we are live, and hello and welcome to a tour of the Atari 800XL with Rapidus. As I promised the owner, I would make a video of this thing working. So hopefully it will continue to work, despite the fact we are live. So without further ado, let's get to business. Now, for this stream I decided to use the Logitech C920 webcam that I picked up cheap last week. Reason being that I'm using the other machine to stream this video. So I'm going to try and remember, and I'm using the condenser mic on the webcam purely for convenience and as a means of testing it to see if it's any good, because I'm still not satisfied with the quality of audio I've been getting from other microphones. 2 different mics I've been using, or 3 different mics I've been using for the whole duration of these videos. So this is just a bit of an experiment in that respect, and also this camera has a wider angle lens, and since I'm pointing the camera at this monitor so that I can show you the VBXE output, the wider angle lens was useful. So, other thing about this machine, and I have to thank the owner Paul for his very generous appraisal of the work that was done on this machine. Now that I have more or less arrived at the conclusion that it works, the latest obstacle that I ran into when I was just about to finish off over the weekend and declare the thing finished was that the machine would randomly die after about 10 or 15 minutes from being powered on. It was apparently random kind of thing, but quite predictable, and the screen would basically blow up and you get random characters on the screen, or the screen would die and go black, and it could happen more or less straight away. It could happen after 10 minutes or so, or even half an hour, or sometimes it would just sit there for an hour or more and appear to work. And I tried various fixes, lines of inquiry. It wasn't anything to do with Rapidus, it wasn't anything to do with stereo. Swapped out the VBXE, swapped out the Ultimate 1MB, swapped out the Antic chip, the GTIA chip, the CPU, pretty much everything on the board. And because the problem was quite difficult to reproduce on demand, it seemed to just be a case of switching the machine on, waiting for it to crash. It was very time consuming to try and track down, and eventually, in desperation, I started to flex the motherboard, because I was almost at the point of just giving up and actually replacing the motherboard with a one from the spares box, which would have entailed a whole lot of socketing work and one thing and another, which I've already done. And I decided to try flex the board a little bit, and when I flexed the motherboard, the problem magically appeared. And by holding the motherboard with one hand and flexing and moving the sort of anchor point along a little bit, I realized that there was clearly a fault on the motherboard around about just to the back of where the CPU is. So I had a close look at the back of the board, and the factory soldering on this board, I had noticed when I started this machine, actually wasn't great. You would get the odd IC, because the ICs were soldered to the board predominantly, and there was a few chips with a bit shorter solder on the legs. It's a revision, I think it's a revision D board, and these just got worse and worse and cheaper as time went on. So I went over the whole back side of the board with new solder and gave it a bit of a clean up just in case there were any fibers of wick or anything, because there's just one single strand of wick fiber, if it's stuck between two pins, can cause things like this. And when I finished reworking the back of the board, flexing the board no longer caused a problem, so I declared the problem fixed, and the machine has run without incident for about an hour on 3 separate occasions. So, all that being said, let's just run through a quick demonstration of one or two things. Okay, we've booted into Rapidus X. Nice RGB picture. Nice RGB picture. I'll just scroll that preview back up. So this is VBXE RGB picture on a TFT monitor, and we can hop into the Ultimate 1MB BIOS and take a look around and see what we've got. This is the latest version of the BIOS. It hasn't been released yet. There isn't anything desperately exciting about it. A couple of small bug fixes and little improvements are all that has happened. So you'll get to see this shortly, and you can download it and flash it to your hardware if you wish. A couple of things are changed. The boot drive. Boot drive refers to the hard disk partition that the system will boot from. If Rapidus X is disabled, because if Rapidus X is enabled, the boot drive will always be the one specified under config sys. Now, when boot drive is disabled, D1 redirect is now grayed out, because if boot drive is disabled, or is actually, there's something else I could change. Yes. Why does this always happen in live videos? Why does this always happen in live videos? I just noticed something else I could do here. Boot drive is disabled, or it is drive 1. D1 redirect, which redirects all references to drive 1 to boot drive, is irrelevant, so it's grayed out. Now it should actually grey out when boot drive is D1. So we will change that. We will go and change it. In fact, what I might do is go ahead and change it now. So we'll dive into a little bit of coding. I'll move this preview window. I'll move the browser window so I can see what's going on, in case anybody decides to get into chat. There we are. Now I can see Open Broadcast, and I can see Eclipse. And can we get into, there we are. Excellent. So here we might as well make this change now. We'll go ahead and fix this live, hopefully. So right, where are we going to put this? So we want to grey out D1 redirect. Not only if, you won't be able to hear what I'm saying now. We want to grey out D1 redirect not only if boot drive is disabled, but also if it is D1. So I will try and move the camera while I'm doing this, so you can hear my voice. I was not expecting to be doing a screen capture. So testing, well, you should still be able to hear that, hopefully. So I'll try and talk loud. Right, so this is the BIOS source code. We are going to go into menu data, because this is where the setup code is that turns things on and off in the menu. So this chunk of code, if I can find the particular one. So we have default menu init, and probably where are we? Here we go. If boot drive is disabled, grey out D1 redirect. Now what this really should do is, if boot drive is disabled or it's D1, grey out D1 redirect. So what it does at the moment is it loads the address of the menu item D1 swap, and it loads the value of the boot drive into Y, into the Y register, and if config boot is non-zero, it jumps here. So really it should test. It should also test for it being 1. So let's say, let's replace this. So we'll compare Y to 2, because if Y is greater than or equal to 2, 0 being disabled and 1 being 1. So if Y is greater than or equal to 2, boot drive is on. So branch of carry set, boot drive is on. And that should actually do it. So we will compile with the Rapidus extension, which is needed by this particular machine. Compile this. Okay. I've got the camera in the most awkward possible position now. I'll just move the tripod around a bit. I'll move that back there. We have respect set up, so that compiled file has gone straight into hard disk, which is a mounted folder image, and we're now going to flash it to the machine. So we will go back to camera 3. There we are. I'm going to move that around. I'm just trying to get that, move the camera so I can get the mic in a position which is going to be heard no matter where I sit. Okay, that looks reasonable. Right, now there's the screensaver activated, so we'll come back out of this. We will go and boot the operating system. And we'll log on to drive B, which is where Respect has the imaged folder. And we'll have a directory of that. Make sure everything works. And then we'll run uflash. Okay, and we're going to flash the BIOS that we just compiled. Okay, and then we will just hop straight back into the BIOS, and hopefully this change has had the desired effect. And it has. So as soon as boot drive is D2 or higher, then D1 redirect becomes active. And when it is D1 or off, it is disabled, which is exactly what we want. So we'll turn that off. So that now works properly, just the way I wanted it to. I'll turn this off again. So the reason I came into the BIOS in the first place was actually to show you how to enable Rapidus. So on this particular computer, Rapidus is controlled. There is a ground wire for Rapidus which goes to the three-way header on the Rapidus board, the ground pin of that header, and instead of tying it to ground, we have connected it to the SO pin on the Ultimate 1MB. These SO and S1 pins on the Ultimate 1MB have been repurposed in this BIOS to be user configurable, and they can be driven by plugins. And the plugin that we have here is the Rapidus plugin, which is a little 1K block of code, which you could actually you could update the BIOS in place with a different plugin, which I probably haven't implemented that yet in U-Flash, but I probably should. So currently the Rapidus core is disabled. We're going to turn it on. We're going to save the settings, and we're going to reboot the system. And we will see that the Rapidus core loads. And the system boots. And the system boots, I think we're at 20 megahertz now. So things should work reasonably quickly. So this is 65 C816 CPU at 20 megahertz. Nice and quick. And we can now go into the Rapidus BIOS itself with the reverse video key and the reset key, and hopefully everything still works. So here we are, Rapidus. I'm not going to go through all these different options. I'm just sticking with the default. The important thing is Ultimate 1MB expansion is enabled. So there you go. We're not going to change anything there. Save and reset. Press reset. System doesn't reboot. System never reboots in Rapidus mode. The reboot on reset issue is confined to classic mode, which I'm not too worried about because you can sidestep that problem. And the way to sidestep the problem of the machine rebooting on reset in classic mode is to not use classic mode, but instead go in here, turn off Rapidus, and save and boot. Save, change, and exit X, and then do a power cycle. And we boot back into the 6502 processor, where there are no such issues as unwelcome reboots on reset. So now that we know all that works, and now we know the display doesn't blow up after 20 minutes, we'll turn it off again. We'll put the side cartridge into the cartridge slot. Even 5 minutes ago I was fixing something. Another little teething problem on this was that the Ultimate 1MB board, the ribbon cable, was snagging on the cartridge doors, which didn't become apparent until I screwed the case together. So I had to take the machine apart again and shorten the standoffs under the Ultimate 1MB board. So the Ultimate 1MB is now like less than a centimeter off the top of the motherboard, but at least everything works. So we will power on again. I hope that this works. Try it again. And we have no screen. There we are. The cartridge wasn't properly seated in the cartridge slot. So we'll go in here and we'll enable the PBI BIOS. And the PBI BIOS gives us all the things we need to mount disk images and do all that cool stuff. So that's all we have to do. I have to make sure our PBI device ID is not 0 because the Rapidus board uses a fixed device ID of 0, and that's something I forgot to change in a previous video, which caused some issues. So this is all looking good. So we'll try it without Rapidus for the moment. We'll press L to start the loader. Hopefully we'll get a list of games. and perhaps we will try something that shows off VBXE. Why don't we try that? Let's try this. Okay, so that was that demo, and that was showing off the VBXE fancy effects, and you'll see that that particular demo doesn't reset the default palette. So to get our colors back, we need to power cycle the machine again. And now we can see that we've got the splash message on the top of the screen that shows the PBI BIOS is active. And while I remember, I think what we'll do is I'll show you a couple of the new things that are in the loader. There's more things have changed in the loader than anywhere else. And as I say, this hasn't been released yet. And also point out that I'm not streaming this to Twitch because Twitch appears to be a complete waste of time. I only get troll messages in the chat, and a couple of people are following, so I'm ready to abandon Twitch. If anybody wants these videos to be streamed to Twitch, let me know. If I hear nothing, I'll probably stop streaming to Twitch altogether because it seems to be a waste of time. So yes, what I will show you, a couple of things changed. I think we need to update the loader as well, because yes, I think we need to update the loader. So we'll do that as well. What about that? So we'll go ahead and update the loader with the version I compiled the other day, because the version on this board doesn't have any of the new features I wanted to show you, so we'll go ahead and change that as well. Okay, back into the BIOS, back into the loader, and hopefully this is the right one. And it is. Okay, that's good. Almost forgot to update the loader with the latest version before I sent this machine back. Right, so what we have a new option at the bottom of this menu, which is search starts with or contains. So there's the two options, starts with and contains. And for those of you who don't know yet, the search facility on this loader, you just start to type. It's not modal. You just start to type a name and it searches the whole directory tree from the current level downwards for the file you're looking for. Now by default, and in previous versions, the search string had to be at the front of the file name. Now you can change it so that you can search anywhere in the string. So the default behavior is still there. Now another thing that seemed to confuse people was to get back out of the search, you have to press delete on an empty string. This is to stop the default directory reading starting up again, and it gets a bit laggy. So press delete to get back out of search. We'll go back into here and we'll change this to contains, and you will see that when I do that, we get, what can I choose here? BAL. You see that it now searches the entire string, so we get ballyhoo, ballyhoo, and basketball because it looked for BAL throughout the string. What else could I try? You get the idea. So you can have that behavior whichever way you please. Searching just at the beginning of the string is probably a little bit quicker, it's a little bit more efficient. But you can configure that anyhow, any which way you like. So the small little changes and a couple of little bug fixes. The other thing was in the BIOS. A few people were complaining that the navigation keys make it easier to slip from one menu to the next and lose the option that you were on at the time. So now the main BIOS reflects the behavior of the loader in as much as the current option in a menu that you're actually on is preserved. So you go back, if you leave a menu, when you re-enter that menu, the highlight bar doesn't go back to the top. So, and hopefully that still works with when you change profiles, and it does. Good. Yes, nothing like live testing stuff. So that all works good. Go back into the loader and we'll try some disk images. For some reason I keep coming back to this particular game, not for any other reason that it's just convenient. Now this game is on 2 disk images, side 1 and side 2, and you could go in and you could manually mount the 2 images like so with a control and space key, and then you could press B to boot the machine. But there's a more convenient way to do that. Now we'll go in here and we'll unmount both of those, and we'll go back here. Now the easiest way to launch this 2-disc game is to make a map file, and a map file is simply a plain text file with the names of the drive identifiers followed by the names of the disk images that you want to appear mounted on those drives. So Pacamenteris map simply consists of these 2 file names with D1 in front of that one and D2 in front of that one and a colon. You have to be in the current directory. So this has to be in the same directory as these basically. And if you hit return on the map file, it silently mounts the ATRs and boots the system. Insert side 2, press our swap button, press enter. And there you go, that loaded quite nicely. Before we leave the BIOS again, this is turned off for some reason, so stereo was turned off, so I've turned that on. Save that. We'll go ahead now and we'll demonstrate that ATRs and that kind of thing work in Rapidus mode as well, which they didn't when Rapidus was first released because there was had been some oversights in the Rapidus firmware, which were eventually fixed. And since about last September, everything's worked quite nicely. So we'll just demonstrate that that is in fact the case. So we'll save that again, and then we will go to the loader, and that will reboot the system, load the Rapidus core, should take us to the loader again, hopefully, and it does. And the compact flash card is still read reliably at 20 megahertz, so we'll go back into here and we'll try and run the same thing at 20 megahertz. You see it loads a little bit quicker. Press the button, press enter. Okay, so that's still working. So this should tell us that we are, there we are, 65C816, 21.12 megahertz. That's not especially accurate, but it gives you a rough idea. Rapidus active. Now we'll try and load an executable just to let you see how quick this is. So we'll go and load U1MB. I think that works with Rapidus. So no one in chat still. Okay, so this is going to be nice and quick, because as soon as this is done, this machine's going to go in the box and be packaged for posting. Stereo detected. That all looks very, very good. So as you can see, things load nice and quickly. I think we've got, what have we got? No, that's not on here. What else could we try? Some visual artifacts there, presumably because of the different processor or the different CPU speed. So this appears to work rather well. I can't remember whether I already did, but thank you again to Paul for his nice testimonial that he wrote earlier this evening. I hope you're going to enjoy this machine. It has behaved itself for the duration of this video, apart from the fact I had to force this cartridge in to get it to work. And it has certainly been a learning experience, but by and large, if you would like to have a machine with all the mod cons, and Tim Phonics in chat, hello, are you making a new version of the Ultimate 1 megabyte firmware? What has changed? If you want to run back through this video later on, because it won't be going for much longer, I've kind of run through a couple of the things which changed. There was, I'll quickly retouch on them again. Primarily in the loader, you can now choose whether or not you want the search string to search from the beginning of the string, the file name, or anywhere within the file name. So by default, it starts at the beginning. So we get matches that start with that text. And if you wanted to search anywhere, you just change it to contains, and then when you type the same thing, it's going to find the same thing anywhere in the string. Some things changed behind the scenes as well, because I wanted to make hi old school Atari 8-bit. Great work, he says. Oh, thank you, thank you. A couple of things changed. I was so desperate for space in this this loader that I resorted to run length encoding and stuff to compress some of these bitmaps down. So that allowed me to elaborate on some of these screen prompts and things. 3 found, Control F to open folder. So that simply means that when you press Control and F, it takes you directly to the folder in which the highlighted file name resides. I'm pretty sure people are missing some of this stuff, but hopefully it becomes a little bit more obvious when it's actually written on the screen. Other than that, it was pretty much cosmetic stuff. If you go into the BIOS, things like this used to read control and return, and I think people used to think that you actually had to press control and return to change an option. Control and return actually reverses the cycle. So if I want to change the time, and I press enter on the hour, but if I want to back up again, I press control as well as return. That's all that meant, but I think it was confusing, so everything's got a conform, unified appearance between the loader and the BIOS. And as I mentioned before, if you're working on an option down here and you accidentally hit the left or right arrow, now when you go back into that menu, the highlight no longer jumps back to the top, it stays where it was, which is exactly what happens in the loader as well. So hopefully these things are just about, yeah, it's just about where it needs to be. I think it's tweak things and tweak things. I took the ultimate set out text out of the top of the BIOS because it was just completely over the top. There was no need for two complete bitmaps, and that freed up a lot of space not having that duplication. So I was able to stretch my legs a little bit in other areas of this thing, again, to make it a little bit more intuitive, to have the prompts a little bit less terse, and yes, everything appears to work. And I'm not even going to try and go into classic mode and press reset. That I'm going to leave as a surprise for the owner of the machine, because if the soldering, the factory soldering problems on this motherboard were in any way responsible for that issue, which I very, very, very much doubt, that's going to be an extra bonus discovery at some point in the future of this machine. I'm not going to spoil the mood by discovering live on video that that little issue still didn't get fixed. I'm just going to believe that it's possible that it did. But as I mentioned earlier on, for my money, we're at 20 megahertz at the moment. For my money, the best way to get out of the Rapidus accelerated mode and back to a stock machine is to just simply turn Rapidus off, as we have here, and you have to do a power cycle to get rid of it. And then when I turn the machine on again, Rapidus is gone, and we are back to 1.7 odd megahertz with a 6502, and no issues when you press reset. So there's not much bodge and kludge left in this computer now. It's still got the pull-up resistors on A0 to A7. I've left them in. They appear to be doing no harm. But yeah, that's it. And wow, what an interesting project. What an interesting project. So hopefully the owner of this machine is going to love it, and hopefully now that he's seen it working with his own eyes, because the poor man was, I kept sending messages saying that I'd tracked down this issue with the board. At first I thought it was a pokey chip, and then I thought it was the GTIA chip, and then I thought it was this, and then I thought it was that, and finally found it. So there we go. So that is Atari 800XL with Rapidus, Adaptus, Ultimate 1MB, VBXE, Stereo Pokey, U-Switch, fully working, 99% working. Possibly the reset issue in classic mode and Rapidus is a firmware thing. I'm not even going to go on about it anymore. I don't really see it's a deal breaker. If that's the only thing that doesn't work, had to swap a couple of chips out just to get the system stable, but the machine seems pretty robust. So, hi Atari fan. Old school Atari 8-bit, was it worth it? That's probably something that only the owner can answer. Hopefully you'll say yes. it hasn't really, it wasn't paid by the hour, thank God, from his point of view. And I've swapped him a keyboard for an Ultimate, which he very kindly sent up. Because the keyboard on the original keyboard on this machine had a couple of missing springs, which unfortunately I wasn't able to repair. So this is not a new keyboard, but a working spare, just to make sure he's got something that works. And the machine's been refurbished. From my point of view, well, I think I mean, it was. Looking back on it, you realise that there are things you could have done a bit differently, and the problem on the board with the factory soldering, that was just one of those things. And sometimes a build goes very smoothly, and sometimes you run into an issue which takes days and days to figure out. But it was a learning experience, and it's, as I said to someone else, it's like smashing your head off a brick wall. Why would you do such a thing? Well, it's a bit like troubleshooting a computer like this, because when it finishes, when you stop troubleshooting, it's a nice. There's no feeling like it. So hopefully the owner thinks it was worth it. I think he'll enjoy it. And I mean, it's pretty incredible that such an old machine. This machine's almost 35 years old now, and yet it's able to host very high-speed circuitry on this Rapidus board and hold things together reasonably well. So yes, but good learning experience. So the next one that comes in for Rapidus, I was going to refuse it outright at one point, but yeah, I would probably entertain it again. Maybe I'll regret saying that, but yeah, I would probably do it again because I know what to look for now. So with that in mind, and I hope you enjoyed this little glimpse at this computer, because as I say, I promised to make this video. So just in all fairness, just to say that it can work, all this stuff can work together, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope the owner enjoys this machine when he receives it in a couple of days' time. And thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.